We all know Martin Luther, right? The monk who kicked off a revolution. But the story doesn't just stop there. What happens after the fire is lit? Well, that's where things get really complicated. And that's what we're going to dig into today.
Because that's really the heart of the story, isn't it? It's a question that pops up all through history. What do you do when the very thing you started starts to spin out in directions you never, ever intended?
So picture this. It's 1522 and Luther's just stuck. I mean, totally trapped. The old guard, the church, the empire, they've declared him an outlaw, a heretic. But at the exact same time, the most radical parts of his own movement are saying he's not going far enough. He's getting hit from both sides, caught in this impossible squeeze.
All right, so let's tackle that first front, the old guard. The massive entrenched power of the Catholic Church and all its allies. And believe me, they weren't just going to roll over and let this Reformation happen.
And just listen to the language here. This isn't some polite theological disagreement. This is raw. The new Pope, Hadrian VI, doesn't even call Luther a heretic in this letter to his protector. He calls him a wild boar, an animal just wrecking everything. It's personal.
And this wasn't just tough talk. No, the Pope makes it crystal clear. He warns Prince Frederick, hey, shut this guy up or you're going to feel the two swords. And what does that mean? It's the ultimate threat, the spiritual sword of excommunication and the literal physical sword of the Holy Roman Emperor's army. It was basically surrender or be destroyed.
And it wasn't just the Pope breathing down his neck. Oh no, you had a whole choir of powerful rulers chiming in. Duke George of Saxony was yelling that Luther's ideas were causing total chaos, and even Henry VIII of England, yeah, that Henry, called Luther a preacher of unsatiated liberty. The entire establishment was closing ranks against him.
But the attacks weren't just coming from kings and popes. And this one probably hurt Luther a lot more. The intellectual front. The very thinkers who were once on his side, they started to turn their backs on him.
And that brings us to the superstar scholar of the day, Erasmus of Rotterdam. Now, for years, Erasmus tried to walk this tightrope. He kind of agreed with Luther that the church needed fixing, but he absolutely hated all the fighting. But the pressure was on, and he finally had to pick a side. And the issue he chose to fight Luther on, it was the big one. Do we, as human beings, actually have free will?
And this little chart here just lays out the massive gulf between them. For Erasmus, the humanist, it was simple. People have to be able to choose good, otherwise God isn't just. Salvation for him was kind of a team effort. But for Luther? No way. He saw humanity as completely broken, like a donkey that's going to be ridden by either God or the devil. You don't choose. Salvation isn't teamwork. It's a rescue mission by God alone. You can see, right? There was no way to bridge that gap.
In Erasmus's own words here, man, they're just so sad. I have sought to be a spectator of this tragedy. He saw what was happening as this terrible play unfolding. He wanted to be the calm, reasonable voice in the middle, but there was no middle anymore. You had the Pope on one side, Luther on the other, and guys like Erasmus just got ground to dust in between.
Okay, so Luther's fighting the Pope, he's lost his intellectual friends. You think that's enough, right? Wrong. A whole new front opens up, and this one was a total shocker. It was an attack from the inside.
Yeah, while Luther's totally focused on fighting Rome, one of his own colleagues, a guy named Andreas Karlstadt, starts taking the Reformation way, way further than Luther ever wanted. For Luther, this must have been a jaw-dropping betrayal, maybe even worse than what the Pope was doing.
So what was Karlstadt up to? Well, he went on a rampage, smashing religious art, banning church music, saying Christ wasn't really in the sacrament. He even started dressing like a peasant, telling people to call him Brother Andreas. Now, he probably thought this was spiritual freedom, but to Luther, this was just trading one set of rules for another. It was all external stuff, completely missing the point about faith in your heart.
But Karlstadt, he was just the warm-up act. Things were about to get a whole lot scarier with this guy, Thomas Müntzer. And his quote here, Bible, babble, bubble, that tells you everything. He basically thought the written Bible was useless. Why? Because he believed true saints got their instructions directly from God, like a divine download.
And this idea led to something truly terrifying, the covenant of the elect. Müntzer believed that the real believers, the chosen ones, should form a holy army. And their job? Oh, it wasn't to convert people. It was to literally slaughter the ungodly, the princes, the priests, everyone, and build God's kingdom on earth with blood and steel.
Now hang on. Does that phrase, the two swords, sound familiar?
It should. That's exactly what Pope Hadrian said, right? The establishment threatening to use the sword to keep order from the right.
And then, bam! Look at this. Here's Thomas Müntzer from the radical left, demanding the exact same thing. He's telling the princes to use the sword to wipe out their enemies. Do you see what's happening? Luther is completely cornered. The Pope on one side and the prophet on the other are both screaming for violence. Both are claiming God is on their side, and both are ready to use the sword.
So this is it. This is the breaking point. You've got a pope who wants you dead on one side and a prophet who wants to start an apocalypse on the other. What in the world do you do? Luther has to choose.
And he chooses what he calls the middle way. He makes this crucial argument. The government's sword, he says, is not for holy war. It's for keeping the peace. It's for stopping criminals. It's for preventing total chaos. And so, in this incredible twist, he turns to the princes, the same rulers he once stood up to, and basically says, you have to step in. You have to stop this.
And the response? It's immediate. The crackdown begins. Following Luther's cue, this state gets involved. Karlstadt gets the boot, exiled from Saxony for causing trouble. And Müntzer? After one last, desperate sermon trying to get the princes to join his holy war, he has to run for his life to avoid getting arrested. Just like that, the radical uprising is put down by the power of the state.
And that leaves us with a really uncomfortable question, doesn't it? Luther started this whole thing by defying the ultimate authorities of his day. But to save his own movement from tearing itself apart, he ended up calling on the state's power, the sword, to silence his opponents. So you have to wonder, did the Great Revel just become the new boss? That's definitely something to think about.